Hi everyone, Investigative Foreigner here. Tim Pool is a guy I have found hard to dislike because he's just such a centrist, you know? He never takes a side, he just always looks for the truth and just tries to be open-minded and neutral. Because he doesn't believe in the sides. Pool made his fame on exposing the truth about Sweden and then resided on a corner of YouTube where he dissects news for a devoted audience. And good for him. Except he's screwing his audience, lying to them, and creating fake news along the same style of CNN.
I and many other people have left the platform.
No, you didn't. You're still making money off of Patreon while claiming the opposite on social media and virtue signaling to your audience. In this video, he makes it sound like he left the site in protest when he's really just collecting cash without giving patrons anything back. He even admits to this in his latest post on the site. But apparently none of his information-hungry subscribers bothered to look there.
I haven't deleted my Patreon. I'm just not using it. I'm not using it. I'm not too interested in making a political statement. I just want to make sure that you guys can support my work in a way that makes sense. Most of the people have left, but some people are still there.
Even after almost everyone left, you still got nearly 600 patrons. So it's not wild to assume you make more than most small YouTubers. I know I'm at least getting a minimum wage salary, so don't act like you're a rebel protesting when you have more patrons than me, plus make all that extra donations on the side. A while back, Pool made a video about losing $5,200 because people wanted to protest Patreon, at which point you could see that huge sum arose from merely 960 individuals. So he's probably still making good bank with that minority he got laid, while doing his best to destroy Patreon's image on social media, so small-time creators like myself end up losing money. Reality is more important than pretty ideals, and that's what really doesn't sit right with me when it comes to this whole Patreon issue. Those who follow my works know that I'm all about free speech, and free speech is exactly what this is supposed to be about. I mean, that's the fancy words that are being thrown around here. But all that's happening in practice is that small-time creators are losing tons of money that could have been used to cement their careers instead. You know, being able to live off of it, which enables you to keep doing it. If y'all want to protest companies for various reasons, that's fine. But here's the thing about that. People have been kicked off of Patreon before. Neither Tim Pool, Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, nor Sargon had a problem to keep using Patreon when Lauren Southern got censored. None of them were telling subscribers to stop using the site back then. They didn't see much talk about the community and how important it is with free speech either. So this doesn't seem like a fight for freedom of speech as much as it appears to be pseudo-activism out of convenience caused by desperation. Or if you're the kind of guy who enjoys acid, think of it as a centrist hive mind. We've known that Patreon is a leftist company for years, so the need for an alternative has existed for years. It was clear from the start they were never gonna tolerate right-wingers ultimately, so it's kinda stupid to start a free speech crusade where there's not any alternatives in place. That really shows certain YouTubers didn't think twice about how it would impact the community. Wouldn't it have been essential to instruct everyone to cancel their donation, primarily to the rich big-timers who can afford to lose it, instead of the small-timers struggling with no other ways to connect donations? Thankfully, Subscribestar is back up again now, but it wasn't even in place when this all started. It's funny how skeptics don't stay very skeptical when it's no longer about their wallet. When I lost $300 in monthly income, I didn't get 300 messages asking if there's different ways that they can support me. Instead, they just kinda left, since other YouTubers had painted up the nightmarish image of a fascist, unredeemable dictatorship, offering no practical nuance to ensure that you're not screwing over the creators who are most affected by Patreon censorship. See, that's how dumb people are. They think that the mere act of not giving money to an activist counts as activism. So it would have been good with just a tad of social responsibility there, guys, just to ensure the safety and benefit for our community. But instead, Sam Harris nobly shut down his Patreon account, which really meant something. When a rich guy who wants to deplatform Trump takes a stance against deplatforming, you know it really means something. So it's all about free speech, okay? So let's not forget that. It's all about free speech, right? Free speech. So, since the ends justify the means, it's okay to lie to your audience, right?
I know there's a political statement to be made. I'm not too interested in making a political statement.
Really? Then why are you blowing up Twitter with paranoid attacks, trying to make people think that Patreon is collapsing?
They eventually had to issue an advance to many people, sending accounts negative as they tried to figure out why credit cards were processing slowly or weren't processing at all. It hasn't been a good couple of months for Patreon. Some of their biggest creators have left in anger. I left, for instance, and I'm glad I did, because you can see what's happening.
In this video, he reads an article about how Patreon is so profitable that as the company gets even bigger, it can actually be a challenge to adapt their model after that growth. And that's why they're looking over new services and revenue lines for long-term sustainability. But Tim tries to spin it into the complete opposite, using merely a trivial technical issue. This is something that happens to banks all the time, as well as PayPal. Yet somehow it's proof that Patreon specifically is going under. And on this very popular, very misleading video, nobody questions the narrative. Because they're creaming too hard from the adrenaline of the culture war. Well, here's the thing about that. I'm way more right-wing than Tim Pool. But even I can acknowledge that stable social change doesn't happen via scam artists and false virtue. When you look over how much he made and likely still makes, it becomes clear that Pool is protesting Patreon because he can afford to. Same with Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. Others aren't blessed with that situation. We can't expect $10,000 in the bank when something goes wrong. So I don't think that Patreon is going under, but it's definitely going in a shit direction, morally speaking. That's for sure. I'm happy people aren't silent in the face of censorship, and I'm happy that there's alternatives being created now. But I'm not happy about all the bandwagoning. The way that certain people handled themselves in this whole mess made it clear that freedom of speech might not be the primary motivation. As usual, action only became relevant when the problem arrived at your own doorstep. And even if completely unintentional, the practical reality still became that certain YouTubers made people feel like caring less about their favorite creators is a good idea. Also, notice how Jordan Peterson said they've been working on an alternative for a while. That's not a charity. That's a business venture. At least if you plan on making it something that lasts. Take a look at Patreon's profits, and you might understand why there's a collective movement happening. I like Peterson as much as the next guy, but I remember when he got Faith Goldie deplatformed. So I'm not exactly sure on how great his freedom of speech boundaries would end up in practice. I've noticed it's very easy to say that you're pro-freedom, but when you're actually faced with opinions that you really hate, it's not as easy to practice that virtue. I mean, honestly, would communists and anarchists be accepted on Peterson's platform, or would they be arbitrarily dismissed as promoters of hate and violence? I'm just saying, things aren't always as obvious and simple as they appear. Being neutral isn't always a strength. Sweden was neutral during the Second World War, and all it did was prolong the Holocaust. So let's not put our faith in people just because they claim neutrality, huh?